Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Alicia Dianne and welcome back to my channel, Alicia Dianne Art, where we learn about art, creative things, how to be active in our art, how to make art that's meaningful and makes a difference. And with that said, we're getting right back into our book club where we are doing Black History Studies. So our first book that we're doing is called Africa 101, The Wake Up Call, and it's by Arikana Chihambori Kwao. I'm afraid I'm gonna say her name wrong, so just forgive me for that. But we still are in the introduction. I hope you had a chance to pick the book up. It's $10 on Kindle, so if you have Amazon Kindle, or if you just have an Amazon account, you can download Kindle, and it's only $10. So we're still in the introduction phases. We read like the forewords, so now we're getting into Arikana's actual words for her introduction. So I'm gonna get right into it. So it says, contrary to what many believe, the Africa we want is an attainable goal for our generation. 1.27 billion Africans on the continent and 400 million more are in the diaspora. So it's a huge population of Africa and Africa descended people. Africa and people of African descent are where we are today because we have not identified and addressed the root causes of our current status of affairs. Just as a tree with bad roots cannot flourish, Africa cannot get ahead without an aggressive, continent-wide effort to deal with the root cause of our problems. So if you didn't see the last episode, I would definitely ask that you go and watch that one before you watch this, because I introduced a lot of like why we're going into this series, and I'm going to keep talking about that throughout. I really feel like it's a time where understanding and knowing and sharing of histories that aren't taught in our schools is really crucial. And I feel like I know I said I feel like a lot in the last one, but I feel like it is something that needs to be shared. So let's go ahead and do this study. I'm going to do a series of books. This is the first one I've chosen because I really love her speeches. So if you never heard Arikana speak, she's the former ambassador to the UA. Her name I can put in the description. She has a nonprofit, and she was a trained medical doctor, and she became like an active speaker. And so she knows a lot of history. She's from Zimbabwe, or like I think that's where she's from. I'll have to double check my facts. I know I said it last time in the last video, but yeah, I'm gonna keep on going. Not gonna go through too much of the description, but it's really, I'll do a short abbreviated version. This book is really about having people understand the history of Africa so that you can understand like why the continent is facing the issues that it's facing today, why there is lots of devastation happening, but also lots of positive things that are happening through the government, through people who are aggressive and outspoken about change, like what's happening right now in Burkina Faso. So just to keep aware, she wants to share this history so people who aren't taught this on the continent and in the diaspora, like throughout the world, can have a better understanding of Africa's histories that are affecting all of us to this day. Okay, let's keep going. So this is, I dedicate this book to Mother Africa and all of her children at home and around the globe. And I'm just reading my highlights, by the way. So it says, for Africa, the unfortunate road to exploitation, disrespect, and ridicule started over 600 years ago when the European settlers first came to Africa. So this is over 600 years ago, when they first started like coming in and, you know, started doing things. We must tell the colonizers that once and for all, enough is enough. After slavery and colonialism, and now neo-colonialism, we can no longer continue in an unjust and unfair economic and social world order. As a result of our history, many Africans and people of African descent are no longer proud of our heritage. Being African or having African ancestry is burdensome for so many. The challenges of being black stare at all of us in the face on a daily basis, even the most successful among us. We need to understand how we got there and what we need to do to address this state of affairs for us black people. So this is really like a call to action, so that she's really saying like there's a purpose behind understanding our histories. And so many times we hear, like, if we don't know our history, then how can we move forward? How can we address things moving forward? How can we understand the actions we need to take if we don't really learn from our histories and understand those things? So I really hope that the key message here is getting across is that we're understanding all of these things so that we can create plans, create ideas, create artwork, create messaging. Really, just what artwork is communication. It's messaging. It's telling our own stories and telling our own feelings, telling our own thoughts, and even offering suggestions, offering perspectives. So we want to keep those things alive. And I think one of the really important things that I think is missing in a lot of people's artwork is the messaging, the heart of it, the knowledge. I think that that's something that we really need to get back to and understand how important that is, how important the research element of art making is. I mean, so many artists have done a great job and really understanding, like if you look at artists like George R. Martin, for example, like the amount of research that was done before even getting to the work is incredible. And I just think that that's something to learn from, even if you are doing a completely different subject matter. It's just learning from artists who are doing impactful work. Really impactful work starts with the research, and I hope that that gets across here. When we unite, we can change the narrative about our Africa, correct the negative image of our beloved continent, raise awareness of the ongoing abuse and exploitation, as well as strategize on ways to address these issues. It says, after practicing medicine in the United States of America for 25 years and supporting several initiatives to lift Africa from its current state, I know that change is possible. What is needed is a clear vision, good leadership, and proper planning and execution. Okay. So let's see. It says change is indeed possible, and we as a people have what it takes to effect the change we desire. The year 2019 was a very significant one indeed. This is because it marked the 400th year anniversary of the first documented landed slaves on the shores of the Americas. So that's really important. So remember 1619, that's an important year. I think all of us should know it and be aware of it. First slaves ship landed here in the Americas, and I think that we need to just understand that 400 years has been significant. 400 years is significant of change. It's been 10 generations. I think she mentioned even before, like each generation is 40 years, so this is 10 generations. So I think that is significant, and I'll tell you more about that why in a little bit why. The time has come for us to make a difference. The African diaspora has a crucial role in playing in building the Africa we want. The capacity that Africa needs for sustainable development is in the diaspora. Mother Africa is calling, and we must answer this call. So that is just her introduction. And I love this part. This is the prelude. So it's almost like a second introduction where she's giving us her background and why this content is so close to her and so close to her heart, and why it affected her so personally. So she gives a story from her childhood that her father told her when she was maybe a teenager. We'll get into that in a moment. But you will really, I think you'll really understand when you read this part why this is so important to her. So I'm gonna even read. Okay, some Zimbabwe. I don't know if I said that right. I think I did. Maybe I did. I don't know. Anyway, so she was saying it was a cool night in Chivu, a southern African village in Zimbabwe. An elderly and wise African man sat on a stool by the fireside with a teenage girl at his feet, listening attentively. That man was Baba, my father, officially known as Mr. Fadzamoya. That young girl was me, Arikana Chiedzo. This is what my father told me that on that unforgettable night. Chiedzo Chababa, he affectionately called to me. I was a teenager when the white men came and took our land. They wore knickerbockers, which covered their knees, so all of us in the village called them the men without knees. They arrived in the village on horseback, in the early hours of the morning and started torching our thatched huts without prior notice. Many of the village was asleep with the exception of a few mothers who were up lighting the morning fires. The entire village was suddenly thrown into chaos. People fled with barely any clothes on their backs, not even knowing what they were fleeing from or where they were fleeing to. Absolutely terrified, the children in our hut, including me, took off running, looking for a place to hide. Unfortunately, there was no hiding place for us, as the men without knees continued to torch our huts, one after the other. Soon the entire village was ablaze, and we were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. The elders were trying to pick up a few belongings they could carry on their heads, while the children were crying, scared to death, and hiding in every little corner they could find. It was pandemonium. So this is the story from her father. She said he paused and he wiped a tear from his eyes, staring at the sky. I mean, I can't imagine. If you can imagine, like, just for a moment, like hearing your own father or your parent telling you a story like this as a teenager, it's kind of unbelievable to think that, you know, this is only like 2 generations removed from us. This isn't that long ago. So just to hear this story that your parent endured something like that and you're hearing it as a teenager, I can't imagine like how that would feel. I know just even hearing the stories from my own grandfather and what he went through, like during the civil rights protests and protesting and being called all sorts of things that no one should ever be called, and being pushed down and hit by police officers when he was a child, and like just the stories. I mean, there's worse stories, but I'm not gonna go into it right now. But hearing those stories from my grandfather was difficult, and this feels like it's on another level that feels so inhumane that it's hard to kind of wrap your head around it like this. And I know that things like this are still happening today, like in different parts of the world. We see things like this are still happening, but let's understand that this happened, and this is how people on the African continent experienced colonialism firsthand. Okay, so I'm going to continue. He continues speaking. It says, the men without knees rode on horses around their village, gathering whatever possessions they could lay their hands on. They then ordered us to leave their village, she put in quotation marks, since it now belonged to them. So he does explain more about his story, and it's actually a pretty long story, so I would definitely recommend reading this whole thing. But I'm going to go back into the parts that I highlighted where it says Manangu, which means my daughter. This is how our land was taken from us. He went on to inform me that these men without knees were thieves. Do not ever forget that. He also vowed that someday we would get our land back. So I know that story is really touching, I feel like. And it says the British settlers who ruled in Rhodesia up until November 11, 1965, when Ian Smith announced unilateral declaration of independence from Britain and established the Rhodesian apartheid regime. This regime was defeated in 1979 through civil war. Ian Smith was a Rhodesian-born white politician, farmer, and fighter pilot who served as the Prime Minister of Rhodesia from 1964 to 1979. He was responsible for apartheid in Zimbabwe. A lot of people don't know that I didn't know that there was apartheid in Zimbabwe. It says it acknowledges that. Most people don't realize that Zimbabwe was under apartheid during Ian Smith's rule. The Rhodesian Front, Ian Smith's army, committed serious crimes against the Zimbabweans. During the Zimbabwean War of Independence, Ian Smith single-handedly ordered the massacre of thousands of Zimbabweans in refugee camps in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, Botswana. I was old enough to remember these atrocities, and yet no one talks about them. So this is Arikana speaking now. None of them are documented in the history books on any significant extent. So thousands of people are killed during this Zimbabwe fight for independence, but it's not written about in the history books. All right. I was also a victim of some of the aggression and abuse, which included shambok lashings during interrogations as to the whereabouts of the guerrilla fighters. The shambok, or letupa, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, is a type of a heavy whip that is traditionally made from the adult hippopotamus or rhinoceros hide. I don't know how thick a rhinoceros or hippopotamus hide is, but I imagine that's a lot thicker than a horse hide or cow hide or any animals that we have in the United States. I can't imagine how thick. When I see a rhinoceros, their skin is like armor. So I cannot even wrap my head around a whip made out of their skin. That's insane to me. And it says in South Africa, they used the shambok by the police as a symbol of the apartheid era. For years, I had black shambok. I think it's SJAMBOK. So I think it's shambok. Mark across my back. She had this mark on her back for years. It says it served as a daily reminder of the evil that men do. All right, and then she brings up. She says it is in my upbringing in such an unjust system that formulated at a very young age, my desire is to seek justice for us black people. I was therefore fortuitous that I would end up being asked to represent all of Africa in the Americas, and she's talking about her position in the African Union. So there's a couple of quotes here as we end this introduction. It says, "I must say this: if you men of Ashanti will not go forward, then we will. We the women will." This is Queen Asantewa. Asantewa. Forgive me with the pronunciations. I may not always get them right. And then we have another quote from Rosa Parks, and it says, "You must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right." That's a really good one. She also gives like these Adinkra symbols after every chapter and after all of the introductions, which I think was really a nice thing that she added. All right, we're going to do chapter 1, and that will be a wrap up for today. So this one, we'll talk about too, like what you thought more about like the whole thing once I get through this part. But already in the introductions, it's given us a lot to think about and let us know like how much. I mean, even if this incident of the Zimbabweans seeking independence and so much of that part of history is not shared more openly to us in this country and presumably worldwide, it's scary. I think it's scary more than it is like disheartening, because there's so much that's just not left out, and it's left out for us to be ignorant about it. But the good thing is that people have their accounts, people were there, people share their stories, and so sooner or later these things start to come together and compile into history books, and we start to, if we're willing, we can start to understand them better. All right, so this is chapter 1, and it's called The First Call. And it says, "The message was clear. I was being offered the position of African Union ambassador to the United States. It was clearly articulated to me that the African Union concluded that in order for a true and sustainable change to come to Africa, the African diaspora, now officially designated by the AU as all the people of African descent living outside of Africa, needed to be front and center in Africa's development." So now she's talking about her own experience, how she got that first call, which I think it came in the middle of the night. She was being asked to be the ambassador, and she had to think about it for a long time. So it says, "While I was still concerned that I was being asked to step into the entirely new space, the confidence that the African Union chairperson had placed in me was something I could not easily dismiss." So she was asked several times before she accepted it. So, I mean, you can imagine if you have your own life, you have a husband, you have kids, and you're working as a medical doctor, and then all of a sudden you're asked to come to DC to be an ambassador to an entire continent. It's like her life is, it's hard to imagine these type of things happening, but I'm wondering like what the activities she did before that led to that. I haven't gotten to that in the book yet, but I think I'm sure she'll get there to like what was she doing it made her stand out so much to the African Union that they called her relentlessly to be their ambassador. Okay, so it says, I packed one suitcase. And this was like after she spoke with her husband, and she'd been thinking about it for 6 months. She says she packed one suitcase and left for Washington, D.C. I stayed at a hotel for 5 months and went to Tennessee as often as I could. I was certain that I would be moving back home in no time. Much to my surprise, I was soon discovered that being a medical doctor more than prepared me to be a diplomat. As doctors, we are trained to psychoanalyze our patients. Patients do not always tell us the truth, which, if you've ever been to a doctor, you probably haven't told them everything. The responsibility falls on us to discern what is organically wrong with the patient, not solely rely on the patient's complaints. And it says, I came to Washington, D.C. with an open mind. Within a few months, however, I began to observe a profound disrespect for Africa and Africans at almost every level of society, within and outside of Africa. This bothered me a great deal. I was aware of the disrespect of black people, but was not aware of the extent and depth of this disrespect. There was disrespect from foreign governments, multinational corporations, international and non-government organizations, non-profit organizations, private individuals who were milking billions of dollars per annum out of Africa, to name a few. That surprises me too, like that she was getting disrespect when she spoke up, but at the same time, I can understand it because I recently spoke up with a non-profit organization, and I received that disrespect too. So I can. It sounds crazy, like you would think that some people that are doing good will not hurt you, but sometimes when they're not ready for what you have to say, then they might not give you the respect that you want. So that's just, I've experienced that. I was aware of the disrespect before I came to Washington, D.C. However, did not realize how widespread and profound it was. Oh, I think this is just what I just said. No, it's not. I thought it sounded like what I was just reading already, but it's not. It says, it was almost as though everyone around the globe who was not fortunate enough to be of African descent had received a memo to disrespect Africans and the people of African descent wherever one encountered us. So that's kind of profound too. What was most painful was our inability at every level to push back against the abuse. The last time I checked, the ability to produce melanin was not a crime. So why are black people being disrespected for being simply who we are? And it says African, no, I read that part, did I? Is that what it said? No, okay. The African Union defines the African diaspora as all people of African descent living outside the continent of Africa, irrespective of their citizenship and nationality. It says, I had been sent to Washington, D.C. to represent the most amazing 1.27 billion continental Africans and 250 million diaspora in the Americas. People with real dreams and aspirations, but somehow found themselves desperate and hopeless with no clear path as to how their circumstances could change. I was determined the Americas would know and understand the truth, and only the truth about Africa and her children, and that we black people must demand our respects. On that note, I rolled up my sleeves, put on my boxing gloves, and was ready for the battle on behalf of our beloved continent, Africa, and her children at home and abroad. All right. I promised myself that I was going to do the best job that I could. I committed myself fully engaging the government of the United States with honesty and integrity, since that was the only way to build and strengthen the relationship between Africa and the United States. I set out to dispel the misunderstandings that are the roadblocks to true engagements as equals. Our white brothers and sisters must realize that they are not superior to black people and that we black people are not inferior to them. We must meet somewhere in the middle where real conversations as equals can begin. And that was the last thing I highlighted from this. There are a bunch of, she does give references, and she does cite her sources too. So just in case anybody's wondering, like, Where's she getting like all of these information and stats. She does also cite her sources after each chapter, which I think was also very good. And the quotes that she put after this was, it's faith is taking the first step when you don't see the whole staircase, by Martin Luther King. And I learned that courage is not an absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And that is by Nelson Mandela. So, that is the introduction in chapter 1. We're going to continue on chapter 2 and 3 next week. I think this was really informative. I feel like it was a very good introduction to her story, both as why the mission matters to her, to talk about African history, and to talk about like why it's still relevant and important for everyone to understand now. And also she gives us a good introduction to how she really got into the work, being called as ambassador to the AU, the African Union, in Washington, and how that just came seemingly out of nowhere. But after thought and consideration, she decided to take that up. And I'm really glad she did, because it was through her speech that she gave through the AU that I found her. And I think many other people have found her. I know that her videos have gotten a lot of views, and a lot of people have really developed that understanding through her voice, through how she speaks to people, through how she really is so passionate about this cause of lifting Africa up out of the chains that are still left behind from slavery and colonization. And I think that when we understand that those chains are still there, then we can begin to do the work to take those chains off completely. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this book club for this week for African Studies, Black History Studies, and I'll see you guys next time. And until then, be grateful, live balanced, be yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.